It was a very close, very comfortable lie, like there were no boundaries between them. Arv felt uncomfortable, his heart racing, and he had no clue how to react. Karan didn't give him a chance to even respond. Arv couldn't process it. Karan had raised his hand, lightly touched his arm, and stepped closer. The touch, gentle, but intentional. And suddenly, Arv's body was flooded with heat. His breath froze in his chest. Karen's proximity was too much. His fragrance, his warmth, his presence, all of it wrapped around Arv like a cloud he couldn't escape. His pulse was pounding in his ears. Welcome to the Prana Fictitious Story Channel. Here, you'll dive into stories full of emotions, drama, and suspense. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe and join this exciting world of stories. The story begins now. Arv had just reached his apartment. Standing by the window, staring at the city skyline, his mind was a storm of thoughts. Turbulent, overwhelming. The day had been long, so long, full of unexpected meetings and cryptic summaries that made no sense. But what had shocked him the most? The interaction with Karen. And the reason it was so shocking? Arv had just started realizing that Karen's presence was different. It felt like he was meeting Karen for the first time, even though they had shared countless moments, countless memories, making it hard to even imagine life without him. But now, there was tension. A kind of unspoken tension that left Arv uneasy every time Karen was near. The moments between them weren't the same anymore. They felt heavier, like something was hidden between the lines, unspoken, unacknowledged. Karen's focus on Arv was intense in a way that Arv couldn't fully grasp. It wasn't overt, but it was there. He could feel it. With a deep breath, Arv ran his hand through his hair, trying to clear his head. He had to face the truth. There was something different between them now, something he couldn't ignore. And sometimes Karen would say things that sounded deeper. A casual comment, but one that lingered, printing itself on Arv's mind for hours. Or a touch. So private, so intimate, that Arv couldn't pretend it was casual. That's when his phone rang, breaking his thoughts. Karen's message. "Are you free tonight? I need to talk to you." Arv stared at the message. He didn't expect it. Didn't think Karen would be the one to message first. But Arv couldn't avoid him forever. He replied, "I'm coming down." With that, he grabbed his jacket and left his apartment. When he reached downstairs, he saw Karen standing near his car. His posture was relaxed, but the look in his eyes, it was searching, intense, like he was looking for something. "Hey," Karen greeted him as Arv approached. His voice was soft but steady, like he was preparing for something. "Hey," Arv replied, trying to ignore the tension hovering in the air. The silence stretched out between them as they stood there, neither sure how to break it. It wasn't like their usual conversations. This one was different. "So, what's the matter?" Arv asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice gave away more than he meant. Karen stared at him for a long moment, then took a deep breath. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I just feel like there's some distance between us, as if something's pulling us apart." Arv felt his chest tighten. "Distance?" he repeated, confused. "We're fine, Karen." But Karen didn't seem convinced. He took a step closer, and Arv could feel the air between them change. The space was shrinking, and suddenly everything felt too close, too intense. "I think you're avoiding me," Karen said softly, almost like he was unsure of the words himself. Arv's stomach nodded. Was he really avoiding Karen? Why did it feel like when Karen was this close, his heart couldn't keep up with the emotions swirling inside? "I'm not avoiding you," Arv replied, his voice sharper than he intended. "There's just a lot going on." Karen shook his head slowly, eyes full of doubt. "I understand," he said quietly, but his words seemed heavier than usual, like they were hiding something else. Arv wasn't ready to understand. "I don't know if I do," Karen added, his voice trailing off. The air between them seemed to thicken, as if every word he said was pushing them closer to something neither of them could yet say. A small smile tugged at Karen's lips, one that seemed familiar, yet too deep. "I'll let you go," Karen said, his tone soft but still holding that unspoken question in his eyes. "But if you ever want to talk, I'm just a call away." Karen gave a small shake of his head, turning to leave. Arv stood there, heart racing, eyes lingering on Karen's back as he disappeared into the night. There was a strange, heavy silence between them now, a silence that seemed to grow with every passing second. Arv shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He couldn't stop thinking about the way Karen looked at him, how his fingers lightly touched the coffee cup. Every movement, every gesture felt deliberate, that intentional. And then Karen leaned forward, just a little. His face was so close to Arv's that it almost felt like he was pulling Arv's life into his orbit. Their eyes locked. You know? Karen's voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Sometimes it feels like you're somewhere else, like you're thinking about someone or something else. Arv's heart skipped a beat. He quickly looked away, his face flushing. Karen's words hit him like a punch, but the meaning was lost. Or maybe it was too close to something Arv wasn't ready to confront. I'm thinking, Arv finally replied, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to hold himself together. Karen just smiled, but didn't say anything more. Instead, he leaned back, his posture relaxed, though his eyes still held that intense, unreadable look. For a moment, the air between them lightened, but the tension was never truly gone. It felt like Karen was testing something, pushing the boundaries, not crossing the line, but testing how far he could go without making Arv too uncomfortable. And then, Karen's hand brushed Arv's just briefly. He'd reached for the sugar container on the table, but the touch, it felt like more. Arv's heart started to race. The electricity between them was undeniable, and his skin tingled from the contact. But Karen didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did. Arv quickly pulled his hand away, but Karen remained unfazed. The conversation shifted, but Arv's mind kept returning to that touch, to how it had made everything else feel so insignificant. Eventually, the coffee cup emptied and the silence returned. But this time, Karen's gaze didn't leave Arv's face. The weight of it was almost unbearable. Finally, Karen stood, but his eyes stayed on Arv for one lingering moment. "We meet soon, Arv," he said softly. Arv just nodded, his heart thudding in his chest, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. He watched Karen leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence, and the tension? It remained, growing thicker as the minutes passed. Something had changed. Something Arv wasn't ready to face. And then, one night, when Arv was getting ready for bed, the doorbell rang. He jumped, startled by the unexpected sound. He didn't expect anyone to show up this late. He opened the door to find Karen standing there. He didn't wait for an invitation. "Hey," Karen said casually, stepping inside like he owned the place. Arv's heart raced. "Hi," he managed, voice shaky. "You still awake?" Karen asked, his eyes scanning the dimly lit apartment. Arv nodded, his nerves flaring. "Yeah, why?" Karen smiled slowly, stepping closer, his gaze never leaving Arv's face. "Are you sure? You don't look like you're about to sleep." And then, it happened. Karen reached out, lightly touched Arv's arm, and moved closer. His touch was gentle but deliberate. The heat that flooded Arv's body was immediate, overwhelming. Arv froze. Karen was too close, his scent, his warmth, everything about him was suffocating. Arv's pulse hammered in his ears. "What are you doing?" Arv asked, his voice trembling with confusion. Karen didn't answer. He just moved closer. The air between them was thick, charged with an energy that neither of them could deny. And then, Karen whispered, "You feel it too, don't you?" His fingers brushed Arv's wrist, a silent invitation to something neither of them had the words for. Whatever it was, Arv wasn't ready, but Karen didn't care. He was pushing, pulling, drawing Arv closer. Arv couldn't breathe. But Karen, he wasn't waiting for an answer. Not yet. Now his hand was on Arv's shoulder, in a slightly resting position. "I can see in your eyes." Arv's heart? It was beating fast, and he followed Ani's while trying to say something, but nothing came. Karen's proximity made it difficult to think. It was difficult to breathe. Karen was very close, and it was impossible to ignore the energy between them. Karen's thumb brushed on Arv's jawline, and Arv's whole body suddenly became still. Karen's touch, his boldness, and the space between them while claiming it, it was dizzying. Arv was unable to take his eyes off. His chest was tightened by the mixture of desire and fear. He was not able to understand what all this was and why his body was reacting like this. Arv, with courage, pushed Karen a little and finally asked, "What happened? Are you Karen?" His voice was strong, but one part of him who never wanted to face these feelings desperately wanted an answer. Karen's lips curved in a knowing smile, a smile that was very knowing, very self-assured. Karen didn't want to make the situation very critical, so he smiled and said, "Oh man, it was a joke. I had seen a drama, so I thought, why not try it with my friend too? Sorry if you felt bad." Karen thought in his mind, damn it, I would have messed up everything right now if Arv got angry with me. Shit. Before Arv could say anything, Karen took a step back. His hand moved away from Arv's shoulder. This sudden distance made Arv feel dizzy as if he was hanging in the middle. He couldn't decide whether he was feeling relieved or more confused. Karen gave him one last look. His gaze was dark and unreadable, and then he left. I am sorry. I remembered some work. It's very important, Karen said. His tone was light now, but with that tension. When Karen went out of the apartment, as soon as the door closed, Arv froze there. His heart started beating fast. He couldn't understand what had just happened. Karen's joke shouldn't take my life. When will stupid understand? We are not in school now. Debt high. Arv was sitting on the couch. His heart was still beating unexpected visit. Karen's touch was still felt on his skin, a constant reminder of the tension that had grown between them. He couldn't understand what to do with this feeling that was growing inside him. His heart was still beating with that closeness. There you go.